Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. Welcome to another plugin knowledge session. In this session, we're going to check out a plugin called Smooth by Oeksound. I hope that's how it's pronounced. This is a plugin that I found when I was reading Sound on Sound, I think it was, magazine. It was sort of talked about by one of the top mixing engineers that he was using it. And I'd never heard of it before, but I thought, I'll give it a shot and see what it's like. And so far, I'm pretty impressed with it. It's they refer to it as a spectral processor that's supposed to control resonance in mid and high frequencies. So it's a bit like I guess a dynamic EQ or a dynamic compressor type thing, where it's targeting frequencies automatically up in the higher range. So it's perfect for vocals and perfect for other instruments that may have some frequencies that are very high pitch that can get out of control, and you just need to be able to automatically and dynamically control them. Now, you can obviously look for those frequencies yourself, but if it's something that's a moving target, then a plugin like this is perfect because, as say a singer changes notes or a violin or something that's higher pitch changes notes, the annoying frequencies can move with it. So it can be hard to sort of control those yourself with an EQ because it keeps moving. So this plugin is ideal for that, and you can sort of adjust by how much it does it, how detailed it does it, and how heavy-handed it is. But it is sort of a plugin that you tweak it a little bit and then you set and forget it. It sort of does the work for you. It tries to analyze and work out what to do itself, and you just tell it how much to do it in certain ranges. If you've got a particular frequency section that you find to be problematic, then you tell it to go harder in that section and less in some other sections. So it's a very interesting plugin. I haven't used it too many times, but I've used it a couple of times on a couple of mixes now and got some pretty good results. So I'm sort of liking what I see at the moment, but time will tell whether I continue to like it going forward. But sometimes controlling those annoying high frequencies in vocals, and that can be one of the toughest things to get because, as I say, it can keep moving, or there can be so many of them that yeah, it's hard to always get them under control, and it's something that really can annoy people because high frequencies can be very piercing in the ear, especially if you start wearing small little earbuds and things like that. Those little piercing noises can be pronounced even further and can really hurt if they're way too much. So we obviously want to make sure that we get that under control and not have anything that's going to annoy the listeners or create an unpleasant listening sound there. So let's get into it and check it out. All right, so here is the interface here, and it's very clean, sort of modern-ish style look here with a very two-dimensional flat look, which is quite nice. It's not trying to represent any fancy hardware or anything like that. It's just simple controls doing what it does. All right, so you can see here from the graph, it's sort of showing you the frequency spectrum here. So you got 250 hertz up, above 16K, and then you've sort of got your dB ranges here, and that's your negatives and your positives. Some of these are a little bit hard to see because of the colors, but I'm not sure how they're coming out in the video, but when I'm looking at them, they're not actually that hard to see. I could just imagine from a distance that they may not be so obvious. We've got a settings panel here, which really doesn't have much in it, other than a few things linked to a website and about and help to go to a manual. So our biggest control here is our depth control, and what this is doing is determining the amount of processing that's applied to the signal. So the higher we go, the more reduction that happens, and obviously the lower we go, the less that happens. Now, this control here is also impacted by how loud the input signal is coming into the plugin. So the louder the input signal, the more it's going to be affected without even moving the control. So you might want to back it down if it's doing too much, if the volume's too loud, or if it's not loud enough, then obviously you push it up if you're not getting enough processing out of this. Okay, so this is the default state that it comes in at. So this white line here and these dots represent the various bands. So we've actually got 5 bands here, and this dark gray one, or blue, whatever you want to call it, that is our low cut setting. And you can see if I click on that dot, it changes this display here. So we can adjust the frequency, but we can also adjust it by just moving it, or we can adjust it via this knob here. So basically it sets where this low pass roll off is. So it's determining what is being impacted by this processing unit here. And we can adjust the Q as well to be how sharp or how wide a setting it is. We get our light blue here, and that is our high. And you can see here, again, same settings, same control. We can move it there. We can also bring it up, down, and it's moving those 2 settings. Again, determining where this range is impacted. And then we've got 3 bands in the middle here. And each one of them has a different setting. So again, we can adjust what the frequency is. We can adjust how sensitive it is or not sensitive, and we can adjust the actual bandwidth, and you'll see the line move in there. So it's determining how wide this band actually is. And if we want to bypass a band, we can just tick that there, and that turns it off altogether. Okay, so we have a sharpness and selectivity control here. These are like master controls, so they affect all of the bands. And the sharpness control determines how sharp the cuts are when it's doing the processing and cutting out the frequencies that it doesn't like. So if we take it up very high, we get very deep, narrow cuts. And if we take it down to 0, they state that it will act a bit more like a conventional dynamic EQ in the way it responds. We've got a selectivity control, and it determines how selective Soothe is about the frequencies suppressed. So it sort of acts, they talk about it acting a bit like a threshold, with higher selectivity value meaning only the stronger and more prominent frequencies get cut. And if you bring it down all the way to 0, smooth will be more general with the reduction. All right, so we've got an output section here. So we've got 100% wet or anything in between. So obviously that's just like doing parallel processing. So if we take it to 0, that means we're doing nothing is coming through and only the dry signal is. Go to 100%, it's all the affected signal. If we want to go anywhere in between, we can do that. We can also adjust the volume if we find that we have affected how the output comes out. We can use this trim control here to balance out the before and after volume. We can bypass the entire plugin if we wish through this tick box, or we can actually play the delta. So if we tick on that, we'll only hear what is actually being pulled out. So then the settings over here, we have a stereo link, and most of the time you're going to place this on a stereo track possibly, or you could put it on a mono track. But if it's on a stereo track, if we have it set to 100%, it sort of combines the left and right channels and has a look at them at the same time. And what it does is it will pull down both channels exactly the same. So if it hears a piercing frequency in the right side only, it will still pull down that same frequency on the left side. If you want them to work independently, then you can take it down to 0%, and then it will actually look at both channels individually and affect them individually. If you want to go to high detail mode and burden your CPU quite a lot, you can turn on some oversampling settings 2 times or 4 times and change our resolution normal, high, or ultra, so we get a lot more detail and a lot more complexity to the signal there, and it's obviously a lot more accurate. But it is going to be a lot more processor intensive and may not actually be really required. So one thing I haven't mentioned with these bands here is that the lower you put it, so this, see it's moving the sensitivity control over here. So what that means is if we go down here, it's going to do less processing in this band and not do so much of it. But if we bring it up, then we do a lot more. So that's what I referred to earlier on, where I said if you have a specific part of this band, so let's say this band's okay, but let's say we have a real problem band up here. If we boost that, it's going to process that and start doing some cuts and stuff a lot more in this section here, this band, as opposed to what it's going to do in these bands here. So you can obviously tweak this to get some interesting sort of bands there to suit what you want to impact. And you can even come out here, whatever you feel you need to get your song the way you want it. All right, so let's just bypass at the moment. And I've got a vocal track here. Right, so I've got a vocal track here. Start that again. If I bring that down, the more we pull it up, the more it affects it. See the big cuts there? If we bring it down, it's a lot subtler. So you can adjust what you want it to target. But not only that, then you can obviously change your big control. And you can destroy that vocal. You might want to be subtle. So the controls sort of work together to a point. And then if we want to change our sharpness, so you'll see how narrow and sharp they are now. Or very wide. And our selectivity. So we could go over the top and then do a bit of a blend between the two, even though that doesn't sound very good. But But you can see what it's doing to try and balance these frequencies out across here and trying to pull down anything that's getting out of control. And if you try to imagine doing that yourself with an EQ or even with a dynamic EQ, it's going to be very hard, whereas this keeps adjusting to suit. And all you're doing is telling it, okay, I want you to really focus in on this area, or don't focus too much on this area, but really focus up here, or however you need to have these settings to get what you need out of it. And as I said, you can change the width of these, and you can even bring this down if you want to start controlling stuff down here. So you can see we can go quite low there to 250, which is usually going to be pretty good for a vocal to go that low. We're not going to generally need to go lower than that. But probably most of the time, being a Soothe plugin, you're going to be targeting more the top end there because you're looking for those higher piercing frequencies. Now, the other thing we can do is listen to the delta. So if we solo that, this is what it's pulling out. So we could bypass these. To give an example of what it's pulling out. There's no time in this life no more. There's nothing we can do. So come round and be friends tonight, and we can have a few. There's more time, well that's fine. We're getting out our line. In the end, all it's so hold me all night. All night. It's a long time ago, babe. There's nothing you can say. What can be done now? So you can hear if we pull the low pass it there, it starts to get a bit thin. So, but again, this is the delta. So we're hearing what it's pulling out. But you could, in theory, target the low end. If you've got a vocal track here that's quite boomy and you've got no problem with the top end, you want to focus some work on the lower end of it, then yeah, you could do this by creating this here. It's a long time ago, babe. There's nothing you can say. What can be done now, girl? There's feelings on the way. There's more time around mine. So what do you say? So why don't you come and play and hold me all night? So getting some of those extreme settings there, you start to get a few artifacts that are not quite natural there. Okay, so there's our factory default setting. So this is what it does for default. So you can see they're really targeting this 4K spot here. That's where they really concern themselves, which is a good idea because our vocal range does not go, it covers a fair range, but it is centered around here. And 4K is an extremely piercing frequency that annoys most people. If you've got too much 4K in something, it can potentially hurt and damage your ears. So it's a good spot to target, and that's what they have done here. They've mainly focused the biggest amount on this 4K range with a little bit around each side. And you got a little bit of targeting here, but it's pretty level, so, nothing major. So there's nothing too piercing there.
So what do you say? So why don't you come and play and hold me all night?
And I think for this song here, the setting I ended up coming up with was pretty much the default. I think it was pretty close to it. Slight adjustments maybe with the selectivity. Let me just compare. Yeah, I increased the selectivity a little bit. The depth, I think I decreased there. But I think everything else is, everything else was pretty much the default setting there. So that's Soothe by Oeksound. Try it out on your next mix, play with it, and see what you think about it. Let me know in the comments. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them. And hopefully this video has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.